All right, everybody here? All right,
Yep. Q&A time.
Q&A time. Thank you for your patience. This is the first time we've done this, so you guys are in an honored position. This is the first time we've done this, so hopefully the first time of many. So it is for you to speak. The way we usually do this is we start at one end, right, and we work our way down. If you don't have a question, that's fine. There's a microphone at the end there, so you can just, when it's your turn, walk up to the microphone, pose your question, and we will give you an eloquent and incisive answer. Miguel? He's got nothing. Really? 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 All right, you guys are working on it. Jill?
You want to start down here?
Yeah, I was going to say.
We're going to start on this side
down here.
You guys get the ball rolling here.
This is the loser section over here. Right? Now, what it is they've got to cogitate. Yeah. They're going to cook up the deep questions over here.
Yeah.
Right?
Make us work.
I don't know how many I'm allowed to ask. So.
One at a time, because we'll just keep going up and down the line. And it looks like we might have plenty of time if this section holds true.
Yeah. Right? All the build-up for the beginning.
So I got two questions for you. I'll go with the first one here. Can you guys talk a little bit about butt wink? I'm sure it's something that you get a lot. I see a lot of people doing it. What is it exactly that's happening? Is it good? Is it bad? Does it need to be fixed? How can we fix it as well?
Okay, we'll answer that one first, and we'll get to your other one when we come back around. Is that all right? All right. So, butt wink.
Do you want to address it?
No, go ahead, because like, I sort of don't care a lot about it.
Yeah, I guess my experience with it had been I coach everybody I meet and I show them how to squat, and I don't run into a terrible amount of problems with it. I think it gets addressed through the teaching method quite fine.
Well, tell them what it is.
Oh, so butt wink is when somebody's lowering their hips into the hole and they're coming out and they're forcing depth by relaxing their lumbar spine in the bottom. And that's something that we instruct people not to do while they're squatting. And I think with teaching somebody the proper setup, like we took all of you guys through today, it's not much of an issue. There's ways to establish depth by getting the knees out and coaching cues in other areas that you can get depth without relaxing your lumbar spine. I don't think anybody did it today. Did anybody do it on your platform?
No. So what we do see is what the teaching method that we use, nobody had butt wink today. Instead, what some people did was at the bottom of the squat, they wanted to go ass to grass, right? Some of you were plenty deep, but it's like, no, that's not deep enough. And so what you did is you let your hips drop by letting them come forward and letting your knees flop forward. So you had a knee slide issue, and you had a floppiness issue, and you were trying to turn your low bar squat into a high bar squat, but your back was still perfectly, extended. You still had a nice rigid back. It was just now in an improper position. So I actually didn't see any butt wink here.
Do you get much of it on a regular basis?
I don't get any of it.
I don't
get usually what I usually see in camps when somebody has butt wink is they're going too deep, right? They're and Rip talks about this a lot. We all talk about it a lot. If you cannot get your depth by sacrificing your lumbar extension, right? So usually what it is somebody who's going 3 inches too deep, they're way below parallel, and they're relaxing their lower back to get there. And if you just tell them to cut it off a couple of inches, right, they're still below parallel. Their hip crease is still dropping below the top of the patella. They've still got their depth, but now their back is tight, and that fixes it.
I'd also say, too, that in the seminar, when we go through the entire teaching method in the seminar, we go around and we have everybody show us that they know how to control their lumbar and set their back into extension. And we'll go around the room and we'll touch, we'll grab. And invariably there'll be one or two people that don't know what they're doing. And then we'll teach them how to do that. We didn't have that problem today and we didn't need to address it, but it's a common deal. And if somebody isn't taught how to do that and they're not aware doing that while they squat, they're going to run into a problem like that. But we teach it on the platform right away, and therefore it never becomes a problem.
All right.
Do you guys have any suggestions for incorporating running into a strength training program? Just because I know it can tax recovery with squatting, like if you have fitness tests you have to pass for your job or things like that.
Okay.
I've talked a little bit with. I'm sorry, your name again?
Dan.
I talked with Dan a little bit at the break, and he's SWAT, and he's a police officer, so he has conditioning tests that he needs to do for professional obligations. Do you want to jump in on it? I have some ideas.
Go ahead.
Get strong, get your squat below parallel, get to depth, and you need to run your novice LP, build your baseline of strength. Don't let yourself get too deconditioned, and just squatting for a while is not going to allow that to happen. And then how frequently do you need to do your examination?
Once a year there's a test.
So you need to be doing some conditioning, and once you get through your basic strength phase, you need to add in a component of conditioning. We prefer HIIT interval type training with a prowler or with a bike. So you keep an established baseline of conditioning there, and then how far is the running test?
Mile and a half.
Not very far. So when you get near the test, you need to break in with maybe some intervals of 200s, 400s, maybe stretch it to a half mile, building up to a mile, mile and a half, and then the day of the run will come. And I'm talking about a 4 to 6 week period maybe to lead up to that. And then you run your mile, you score well on it, and then you go back to your training and you start another strength cycle.
So let me guess, they want you to run a mile and a half in about 15 minutes? 12 minutes, all right.
But you have to do, there's other things you're doing before.
So in my day of first class Marine Corps, PFT was 3 miles in 28 minutes. You know, we were in the gym doing stupid shit in the gym, but we were in the gym. We didn't run all the time. And so you'd be like, hey, PFT's coming up in 6 weeks, and you'd start running. And then, your PFT, you pass it, right? So a mile and a half is not that hard, right? The real issue for you is the time requirement. You got to get it in under 12 minutes, but that's also not that hard. So about, like Chris says, about 4 to 6 weeks before you have to run your PFT, you start training for it, right? And my guess is you can run a mile and a half right now. So it's not an issue of the distance for you, it's an issue of the time, getting your time down, right? And if you're conditioning the rest of the year with high intensity interval training and your legs are strong from the squats and the deads, right, you're not going to have any problem with that. Just start your training for your PFT 4 to 6 weeks ahead of time, and you're not going to have a problem. You can anticipate that you may get a little bit of interference from your running training with your strength program. That's all right, and then you'll run your PFT, you'll pass it, and then, you'll just go back to your regular training, and you probably wouldn't even have to, well, you're in LP now, aren't you? Right, so just go back to your training. You might have to take a little bit of weight off the bar, but it'll come right back. So, not a problem.
And the more times you do that, the more trained you become, the more experience you gather doing that time, it'll just, no big deal. It's not that big of a deal.
Next. Salo. Yeah, hit me, man.
Hit me.
I'm curious about how you incorporate conditioning or aerobic type of conditioning to the weightlifting without compromising the strength and even the muscle mass.
It's an excellent and important question. Crisco will be happy to answer it.
Yeah, he's got a lot to say about it as well. I think we had a strength and endurance. There's a video on the Starting Strength site, but these guys dialed this into some deep layers. My comment would be conditioning is very important, and I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about a lot of our positions on conditioning. Conditioning is important. I mean, people need to be in shape. It's real simple. We make the suggestion, and Rip really hammers on it it will compromise your novice program, and we don't want you going, it depends on where, there's different levels of conditioning, different levels of endurance people try to seek, and when you start training, we want to control those variables as much as we possibly can so that we can get an eye on what's going on with the stress that's being put on, and we know what your recovery is going to do. Once you get past that novice phase, you need to bring in a component of conditioning, and it totally comes down to what your goals are and what you're trying to train for. And I've mentioned this now to a few people, and most people don't really have a clear idea of what that is. But if it's a balanced approach to strength and conditioning, you lift 2-3 times a week, and you do. We encourage a high-intensity interval training. My experience has been the prowler and the bike. That's why I have a bunch of them in my gym. Are the best ways to go about being able to do both without having too much of a impact and an interference with your strength progress. But at a certain point, you have to have an idea what your overall training goal is, and you can't serve them both very well. You can become a stronger, more powerful athlete, and you can become more conditioned, but at a certain point, if strength isn't the number one goal, then conditioning comes in, and to what level, it kind of is dependent on goals and what you're trying to accomplish. You're trying to run 5Ks, you're trying to play racquetball, or you're trying to play a sport, or you just want to be generally fit. If you want to be generally fit, I think a 2 to 3 day a week barbell program with a day or two of conditioning and a moderate approach to diet and stress and a healthy lifestyle, you'd be all set.
I pretty much agree with that. So much is dictated by your goals. So if you're a deconditioned adult and you're just out of shape, we're going to begin your conditioning program with a novice LP, right? Simply getting you under 3 sets of 5 with increasing weights 2 or 3 times a week is going to improve your conditioning up to a point, right? Your body's going to have a certain amount of stamina to get through that 90-minute workout with that. By the end of LP, you're pretty much conditioned to that level of work, to that level of work capacity. And then so much is going to depend on, well, what do you want to do, right? So there's this old saw about you just lift weights and play your sport, right? Well, if your sport is golf, I don't think that works so well, right? If your sport is chess, I don't think that works so well. But if your sport is cross-country skiing or Brazilian jiu-jitsu, right, or rock climbing, then that actually kind of works pretty well, right? Bruce Lee said a long time ago that the best conditioning for the event is the event itself, right? So if you're a fighter, the best conditioning for fighting is fighting. You're guaranteed to be working in the appropriate energy system for that activity, right? Because you're doing it, right? The best conditioning for hockey is hockey, right? That said, I think that whether you're a fighter or a rock climber or a hockey player or whatever, right, you're going to do yourself a lot of good by pushing the prowler once or twice a week and getting that conditioning at the real high intensity end of the energy spectrum. If your sport is accounting, right, or being a physician or being a lawyer, right, or being a plumber, then you're still going to push the prowler, right? You may need to pay a little bit more attention to your conditioning there, right? So conditioning is very important. It really comes into play in the intermediate program. We always add a conditioning component in the intermediate program for people who are not engaged in some sort of outside thing. Now, some of our lifters are involved in other stuff that they do, and they get a lot of conditioning work outside the gym because they do other stuff. They do martial arts like Chad or something else. There's also the issue of not only being conditioned to meet the demands of your life and environment or your sport, but you also have to be in shape to train, because once you become an intermediate, right, your workouts are going to get more complicated. They're likely to have more volume. They're likely to be more taxing, and you've got to be in shape for that. So Andy talks about being in shape to train, right? Not just necessarily training to get in shape, but being in shape to train, right? So you've got to be well conditioned to tolerate those intermediate programs, which can still be very taxing. So it's an important component, and usually by the time LP is over, we're pretty aggressive about introducing some sort of conditioning component into the program. We prefer a conditioning component that's not going to interfere with strength. Something that involves a repeated motor pattern, that doesn't require a lot of skill, can be instituted immediately, can be progressed in a quantitative manner. In other words, it can be dosed just like the lifts are dosed, right? So that we can follow progress in that conditioning program. And that has a minimum of eccentric motion so that it doesn't cause any soreness or interfere with gains in strength. That's why, as far as we're concerned, the prowler is king. The prowler is king. It works, it digs deep, deep, deep into the anaerobic end of the energy spectrum. It's a perfect modality for high intensity interval training. It confers both aerobic and anaerobic benefits. It results in minimal soreness, and anybody can prowl. I mean, it's like, oh, your form on your prowlers. It's like everybody can prowl. It's like, grab the damn thing and push it. There are a couple of finer points like Rip talks about in the video, but you can get people prowling on day one, and you can load it. You can add 5 pounds at a time, right? You can add 1 extra run. It's dosable, right? So it's really is the king of conditioning exercises as far as I'm concerned. The ones that we don't like are things like, running, right, or high impact activities that are a lot more likely to interfere with your strength performance.
So no, this is gonna be for Chris probably only.
Thank God.
Black Iron Training has just moved locations.
Yep.
They're now in East Lansing.
Yep.
So tell us a little bit about your new space and what kind of new capabilities you've got, and how it's gonna help the folks that come and train there.
Okay, yeah, I'm real proud of the new space. It's kind of a work in progress right now. I'm trying to figure it all out. I have 6 power racks, a whole lot of bars. I'm in the process of building an Olympic platform. I also have a nice big old piece of turf from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers practice facility that has 4 sleds on it. I have 8 group exercise bikes, like your spin bikes for conditioning, ropes and tires and a lot of the kind of conditioning work that a lot of the hockey players and athletes will use. So it adds a layer of complexity to the conditioning I can bring in for people, which I like. There's more space, so over time we should be able to host larger events, potentially some lifting competitions, good old get-togethers. Over time, as I get operations and systems in place, more people will be coached and trained, and I'll be able to kind of service more folks. That's a unique challenge that's presented because you need good coaches to be able to do that, and I'm only one guy and I can only coach so many people, but I actually have acquired a little bit of skill at what I do, so these days I'm confident running the place with many people lifting, and I can kind of run the floor. Finding somebody else that can do that'll be a challenge, it'll be difficult, but hopefully over time I'll have some coaches doing some private starting strength sessions so that I can keep rates affordable for some folks, and with events more frequently get more people exposed to this coaching method. For my regular members, it's just cool. It's just a neat big old space. You've been to the old gym. It's a whole different level. It's well lit, big old ceilings. It's a training environment. It's cool. Very excited about that. Happens to be in an ice rink, so as a hockey guy, I'm gonna have a lot of fun with some hockey players. And
So it is cool.
Yeah, literally. Anthony Clark texted me. He's like, "Is there air conditioning in the place?" I was like, "Well, dude, it's in an ice rink. It better be air conditioned." So, and one of the real cool factors about it is in East Lansing, and it's a big area around. There's a population that comes in and out. The rink is busy constantly. So, Black Iron Training going on the windows, and when there's a tournament in town, and you got people from all around the state, all around the country coming in and out. It's going to be
So
a
instead
great
of
deal of
Prowler,
exposure.
do you push the Zamboni?
Yeah. I'm actually in the process of learning to drive the Zamboni, so I can do that for my free extra bucks here and there. But it's pretty.
I
cool
haven't
space.
seen it. I haven't seen it yet, so I'm eager to see it.
It's pretty cool. Once I get it up and running, we'll have a camp there. It's gonna be pretty cool.
So why do I need a powerlifting shoe while squatting? Why can't I squat barefoot?
Okay, that's a good question. Why can't you squat barefoot? Okay, have you had an opportunity to drop a weight on your foot yet?
That can be arranged.
Okay.
But I have rubbed it on my shoes and it hurts, so it still doesn't matter.
So do an experiment. Take a 5-pound weight and drop it on your bare left foot, and take another 5-pound weight and drop it on your shod right foot. All right? Then go to the emergency room and see which one's the most fucked up. All right? So that's reason number 1, right? And reason number 2 is, have you actually squatted barefoot, Santosh?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
I've squatted using running shoes.
Right. So most people find that the elevation in the heel provides them with a mechanical advantage at the bottom of the squat,
Okay.
and allows them to squat stably and allows them to squat more weight. And we could talk about the biomechanics of why that's true. I'm not sure I really wrapped my head around that. I just know that when I get up in the morning and I'm wearing my slippers or my socks and I have to squat down to give the cat her milk, I wish I had squat shoes on, right? It's a more comfortable, more powerful position with a little bit of elevation in the heels, which is exactly why you see these old pictures of Arnold, like squatting a bunch of weight on his back, and he's like squatting in, I don't know what he's squatting in. He's squatting in like Chuck
Canvas
Taylors or
shoes,
something,
yeah.
canvas Taylors, and he's got a 2x4 under his heels,
Yeah.
right? Because he wants that biomechanical advantage at the bottom. So wear your shoes. And don't drop any weights on
Did
your
you
foot.
wore Olympic shoes today,
I do.
right? Yep.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
noticed that.
It's a funny question. I've been asked it many, many times in the gym over the years, and I just encourage everybody to get shoes. And I've had a few real anti-shoe folks. One of them is a chiropractor who happens to teach yoga as well, and she just kind of got her ideas. So I don't mess with her too much, and I finally got her to wear a pair, and she's like, I don't know what it is, but you were right. I was like, well, thank you, that was good. And I had another guy for a long time who just never wanted to wear them. He was a real minimalist. He was a runner. He never really wanted to wear shoes, and I didn't want to argue with him about it. So whatever, fine, just wear your socks. That's fine. But every single other person I've ever put on a pair of shoes has worn them and said, I need a pair of shoes. And I keep a pair around the gym, usually in different sizes, and just try those on once. And I've never had one person in all time to say, oh, that didn't feel better. So I don't know what it is. I don't think there's a lot of science to it. I think the heel elevation helps, and it just makes for a stronger squat.
Yeah, somebody like Steve Hill could probably answer that question a lot better than I could.
Yeah,
but
me too.
The most frequent objection you hear is something like, well, we God didn't give us shoes, or shoes aren't natural, or something like that. My answer to that is always like, do you cook your food? Do you use fire? Right? Do you have a cell phone? Right? It's really kind of silly. I think it boils down to there's a reason that the squat shoe has evolved. There's a reason that the powerlifting shoe has evolved. It allows you to squat more stably and more powerfully, and therefore to lift more weight more safely. So.
And it really corrects a lot of problems. There's a lot of fundamental issues a beginner will have that if you put them in shoes, it just fixes
so many times you have a raw novice in their first week or so, they're like squatting in Chuck Taylors or God knows what, and you finally
Nikes or something.
they show up in squat shoes the first time. They wear squat shoes and they squat and they go, oh, right? It's like their first sexual experience or something. It's like it makes all the difference. Okay.
Yep.